When billionaire entrepreneur Elon Musk decided to make a surprise visit to his estranged father in South Africa, he expected their usual awkward conversation filled with old tensions. What he never anticipated was finding 77-year-old Elon Musk balancing on a ladder, repairing solar panels for an elderly neighbor, completely free of charge. For a man who had spent decades distancing himself from his terrible father, the sight stopped Elon cold. Why would the difficult, self-centered man he grew up with be performing acts of charity? As Elon is about to discover, this unexpected encounter will reveal family secrets, force him to question everything he thought he knew about his father, and potentially change their relationship forever. Elon Musk stared out the window of his private jet as it began its descent into Pretoria, South Africa. The landscape below brought back memories, some good, some not so good. He hadn't planned his trip. In fact, just yesterday, he'd been overseeing the final touches on a new Tesla factory in Texas when the idea struck him. Maybe it was time to see his father again. "We'll be landing in 10 minutes, Mr. Musk," the pilot's voice crackled over the intercom. Elon nodded, even though no one could see him. His stomach felt tight. He hadn't seen his father Errol in person for nearly 5 years. Their phone calls were rare and usually ended in arguments. The jet touched down smoothly. Soon Elon was sitting in the back of a simple black car, not wanting to draw attention. He checked his phone one last time before the driver pulled away from the airport. "Still no answer," he muttered. He'd tried calling his father twice, but Errol hadn't picked up. That wasn't unusual. His father often ignored calls, especially from him. 40 minutes later, the car stopped in front of a familiar house. It looked smaller than Elon remembered. The garden was neater, though. His father had always been particular about his yard. "Wait here," Elon told the driver. "I might not be long." He walked up to the front door and rang the bell. No answer. He tried again and waited. Nothing. He peered through the window but couldn't see anyone inside. Maybe his father was out. Elon walked around to the back of the house, where a tall hedge separated his father's property from the neighbor's. As he rounded the corner, he stopped short. There, on the neighbor's roof, was his 77-year-old father. Elon Musk was balanced carefully on an aluminum ladder, bent over what looked like solar panels. He wore old jeans and a faded work shirt, his white hair gleaming in the bright African sun. He moved with the careful precision of someone who knew exactly what he was doing. Below the ladder stood an elderly black woman in a colorful dress. She looked worried, shading her eyes as she watched Errol work. "Mr. Musk, please be careful up there," she called. "Your age is not for climbing." "Roofs!" "Nonsense, Mrs. Kagomo," Errol replied without looking down. "I've been climbing things since before you had grandchildren. Just a loose connection here, that's all." Elon couldn't move. This was his father, the complicated, difficult man he'd be grown up both fearing and trying to impress. The father who'd told journalists Elon was a disappointment. The father Elon had called terrible in interviews, and here he was, fixing solar panels for his elderly neighbor. For free, apparently. Elon stepped closer, still unnoticed. He could see his father's hands working with tools among the wiring of the panels. Even in his late 70s, Errol's movements were precise. He was an engineer, after all. That was something they shared, though Elon rarely acknowledged it. "Almost done, Mrs. Kagomo," Errol called down. "Your system will be working properly again in just a few minutes." Thank you," the woman said. "You are too kind. Let me bring you some water at least." Later, Errol waved dismissively. "Let me finish this first. Mrs. Gomo, turned and noticed Elon standing there. Her eyes widened slightly. "Hello," she said. "Are you looking for someone?" Errol glanced down at the sound of her voice. When he saw Elon, his hands froze. For a long moment, father and son just stared at each other. "Elon?" Errol finally said, sounding genuinely surprised. "What in the world are you doing here?" "I was about to ask you the same thing," Elon replied, finding his voice. "I didn't know you were in the solar panel repair business." Errol's face hardened. The momentary surprise disappeared, replaced by the familiar defensive look Elon knew too well. "Mrs. Kagomo's system went down last week," Errol said stiffly. "Just a bad connection and a blown fuse. Nothing complicated." "I'm sorry. I don't understand," Elon said, walking closer. "You're fixing her solar panels? Since when do you do that?" Mrs. Kagomo looked between them, sensing the tension. "Your father is a good man," she said to Elon. "When my panels stopped working, the company wanted too much money to come fix them. Mr. Musk said it was a simple problem and he would help." Elon couldn't quite process this. The father he knew was complicated, difficult, and self-centered, not the type to spend his afternoon helping a neighbor with repairs. "Why don't you come inside for tea when you're finished?" Mrs. Como suggested, clearly trying to ease the awkward situation. "Both of you, it's too hot to stand in this sun." "I'll be down in 5 minutes," Errol said, turning back to his work. But his hands weren't as steady as before. Elon's presence had clearly rattled him. Elon watched as his father connected the last few wires. The man who had shaped so much of his life, for better and worse, was now doing charity work? It didn't fit with anything Elon thought he knew about Elon Musk. Mrs. Kagomo touched Elon's arm gently. "You look just like him, you know, when he was younger." The comment jolted Elon. Being compared to his father had always bothered him. And yet, here they both were. Two men who understood electricity, systems, and engineering. Two men who could fix things. Two men who rarely understood each other. "There," Errol declared from the roof. "Try the switch now, Mrs. Kagomo." The elderly woman hurried inside her house. A moment later, she called out triumphantly from the doorway. "It works! The lights are on!" Errol carefully made his way down the ladder, avoiding eye contact with his son. He packed his tools methodically into an old leather bag. "So," Errol said finally, his voice gruff. "So, you flew all the way from America without calling first?" "I tried calling," Elon said. "You didn't answer." "I was busy." Errol gestured toward the roof. Mrs. Kagomo clapped her hands. "Please, both of you, come inside. I have cold drinks and something important to tell you." Elon and Errol looked at each other, two stubborn men at a crossroads. "After you," Errol said. As Elon walked toward Mrs. Como's house, one question kept spinning in his mind. Who was this man who looked like his father, but acted nothing like the Elon Musk he thought he knew? Mrs. Como's living room was small but neat. Family photos covered the walls. A ceiling fan spun slowly overhead. The three of them sat awkwardly as Mrs. Como poured tea. "I'll get some cookies," she said, disappearing into the kitchen. Left alone with his father, Elon's mind flooded with memories. Sitting in this unfamiliar house in Pretoria brought it all back. His childhood in South Africa, growing up with a father he could never quite please. He remembered the house they'd lived in after his parents divorced when he was 9. His mother, May, had moved out, taking his brother Kimball and sister Tosca with her at first. But Elon had chosen to live with his father. Why had he done that? Even now, he wasn't sure. "So," Errol broke the silence, "what brings you to Pretoria? Surely not just to see your old man." Before Elon could answer, a memory flashed in his mind. He was 10 years old, sitting in Errol's home office, watching his father work on electrical diagrams. "Pay attention, boy," Errol had said. "This is how the world works." And Elon had paid attention. He'd learned about circuits and wiring long before most kids knew what electricity was. "I had some time," Elon said. "Thought I'd stop. Bye." Errol raised an eyebrow. "The richest man in the world doesn't just have some time." Elon felt his jaw tighten. This was the father he knew, always ready with a skeptical comment, always questioning his motives. Mrs. Gomo returned with a plate of cookies, saving Elon from responding. "Mr. Musk tells me you make electric cars," she said to Elon with a warm smile. "Is that right?" "Yes," Elon nodded. "Among other things." "Such a smart family," Mrs. Kogomo said. "Your father was telling me about when you were a boy, how you built a computer when you were very young." Elon glanced at his father in surprise. Errol was studying his teacup, avoiding eye contact. "It was just a simple program," Elon said. "When I was 12, I made a video game called Blast Star. Sold it for about $500. What he didn't say was how Errol had reacted to that accomplishment. Not with pride, but with criticism. "If you'd worked harder, you could have gotten more money for it," his father had said. Growing up in Pretoria had been difficult. The Musk family had money. Errol was an engineer and part owner of an emerald mine, but Elon had often felt alone. He'd been bullied at school, beaten up by other boys. Coming home hadn't been much better. With Errol's harsh words and high expectations, Elon remembered the bookstore in Sandton City Mall where he'd spent hours reading. Books had been his escape. Science fiction stories about space travel and brave explorers. He'd read everything by Isaac Asimov and Robert Heinlein. Books never criticized or judged. "You know, I taught at Pretoria Boys High School for many years," Mrs. Kogomo said. "Where you went to school, yes?" Elon nodded. "Yes, before I left South Africa." He remembered those final years, how desperately he'd wanted to get to America. When he was 17, he'd left for Canada, partly to avoid serving in the South African Army, which enforced apartheid. The racist system that had kept people like Mrs. Como separated and oppressed. "Why did you leave Canada for America?" Mrs. Kogomo asked, as if reading his thoughts. "I wanted to be where the most important technology was being created," Elon said. Silicon Valley was the place to be in the 1990s. He didn't mention how he'd lived on just $1 a day when he first moved to Canada, how he'd worked odd jobs before getting into Queen's University, how he'd later transferred to the University of Pennsylvania and earned degrees in physics and economics. "Your son has always been stubborn," Errol said to Mrs. Kogomo. "Once he sets his mind on something, nothing can stop him." Was that almost a compliment? Elon couldn't tell. "Like father, like son," Mrs. Kogomo said, with a knowing smile. Elon's phone buzzed in his pocket. Probably his assistant wondering why he'd suddenly flown to South Africa. Or SpaceX engineers with questions about the upcoming rocket launch. Or Tesla executives needing decisions. His life was a constant stream of people needing his attention. He ignored the phone. "When did you start working with solar panels?" Elon asked his father. Errol shrugged. "I'm an engineer. It's not complicated technology." "That's not what I asked." "About 3 years ago," Errol said reluctantly. "Power outages were getting worse here. They call it load shedding, but it's just incompetence. The national power company can't keep up with demand. People started installing solar, but the companies charge too much for repairs." This sounded logical. but it didn't explain why Errol was doing free repairs for neighbors. The father Elon remembered wasn't exactly known for charity work. "Your father has helped many people in this neighborhood," Mrs. Kagomo said. "Not just me." Elon took a sip of tea, studying his father over the rim of the cup. Errol looked older. Then Elon remembered. His white hair was thinner, and deep lines crossed his face. But he still had that same intense look in his eyes. The grandfather clock in the corner chimed, breaking the silence. "I should get going," Errol said, standing up. "Thank you for the tea, Mrs. Kagomo. But you must show your son what you've done for the community," Mrs. Kagomo insisted. "Elon, your father has helped at least 20 families on this street alone with their solar systems." Elon looked at his father, who seemed uncomfortable with the praise. "I have nothing better to do with my time," Errol muttered. But something didn't add up. The Elon Musk that Elon knew had always been focused on himself, on making money, on pointing out other people's failures. That man wouldn't spend his retirement fixing solar panels for free. "I'd like to see," Elon said, also standing up. "If you don't mind showing me." Father and son looked at each other. Two tall men with the same strong jawlines and intense eyes. Both brilliant with technology. Both terrible at expressing feelings. "Fine," Errol said finally. "But I'm not doing this for show, you understand?" As they walked out of Mrs. Kagomo's house, Elon felt like he was seeing his father through new eyes. The man he'd spent decades trying not to become was suddenly a stranger to him, and he wanted to know more. Outside, the African sun was still strong, though it was late afternoon. Errol led Elon back to Mrs. Kagomo's roof to show him the solar panel system he'd just fixed. "It's a simple setup," Errol explained, pointing up. 6 panels connected to a battery system in her garage, enough to keep her lights on and run a small refrigerator during outages. Elon shaded his eyes, studying the installation. Despite its simplicity, the work was neat and professional. His father had always been good with his hands. "The main problem in South Africa isn't installing these systems," Errol continued. "It's maintaining them. Most people can scrape together enough money to buy a small system. But when something breaks, the repair companies charge almost as much as a new installation." Elon nodded. He understood the economics all too well. His own company, Tesla, had faced similar challenges with their solar division. "You could have started a business," Elon said. "Charged half what the other companies do. You'd still make money." Errol looked at him sharply. "Not everything is about making money, Elon." The comment stung, especially coming from his father. In Elon's memory, Errol had always been focused on financial success. As they walked down the street, Elon's thoughts drifted to his own solar journey. He remembered the day in 2016 when Tesla acquired SolarCity for $2.6 billion. Many had questioned the move, calling it a bailout of his cousin's struggling company. But Elon had seen the bigger picture, a world where homes could generate their own clean power. His first big solar project had been in Kauai, Hawaii. Tesla had built a massive solar farm with thousands of panels, backed by power pack batteries. The project had cut the island's fossil fuel use by millions of gallons per year. Then there was the Gigafactory in Nevada, partly powered by a solar roof the size of 6 football fields, and the project in South Australia, the world's largest battery installation at the time, providing backup power to a region plagued by blackouts. Had his father been watching those projects from afar? Had Errol seen the news about his son's solar achievements while sitting in his Pretoria home, thinking about South Africa's own power problems? "This is the Molefe house," Errol said, interrupting Elon's thoughts. They had stopped in front of a small blue house. Their inverter failed. "Last month," The company wanted 6,000 rand to replace it. Ridiculous. So you fixed it? Elon asked. I had a spare part that worked well enough, Errol nodded. Not perfect, but it gets the job done. As they continued walking, Errol pointed out several more houses where he'd made repairs. One family needed new batteries, another had wiring problems. At each house, Errol knew the people's names and their stories. How did you learn all this? Elon asked finally. The specific details of solar systems, I mean. Errol gave a small smile. I read. I study. I'm an engineer, remember? Not so different from you. Not so different. The words echoed in Elon's mind. All his life, he'd tried to be different from his father, better than his father. And yet here they were, both fascinated by sustainable energy, both solving technical problems. They turned a corner, and Errol stopped to rest on a low wall. Despite his energy, he was still 77 years old. The walking and talking had tired him. Why solar? Elon asked, sitting beside him. Of all the problems you could solve, why this one? Errol was quiet for a moment, looking out at the neighborhood. You know how bad the power situation is here. Some days people have electricity for only 4 hours. How do you run a refrigerator for 4 hours a day? How do children study at night? How do small businesses survive? His voice had a passion Elon rarely heard when they were talking about business or money. But that's not the whole reason, Errol continued. After I retired, I needed something to do, something useful. When Mrs. Kagomo's system failed, I helped her because she's a good neighbor. Then word spread. One thing led to another. He paused, then added quietly, and maybe I saw what you were doing with Tesla's solar division. Maybe that influenced me a bit. Elon felt an unexpected warmth. The idea that he had influenced his father, that Errol had been paying attention to his work, it was new territory. Just then, Mrs. Kagomo appeared, walking toward them with a young man beside her. Ah, there you are, she called. I have brought my grandson Thabo to meet you both. He studies engineering at the University of Pretoria. The young man looked nervous, but excited. Mr. Musk, he said, shaking Errol's hand. Then he turned to Elon, eyes wide. And, Mr. Musk, I'm honored to meet you both. Thabo wants to work with renewable energy systems, Mrs. Kagomo said proudly. Your father has been teaching him about solar installations. Is that so? Elon looked at his father, with new interest. Just basic things, Errol said dismissively. The boy has talent, though. I've read all about Tesla's solar roof, Thabo said to Elon eagerly, and the Powerwall battery system. I even wrote my term paper on your South Australia project. Elon smiled. What did you think of it? Brilliant solution to a serious problem, Thabo said. But I've been wondering if a similar approach could work here in South Africa, just scaled differently for our needs. Before Elon could respond, Mrs. Kagomo touched his arm. I must get back to prepare dinner. Both of you will join us, yes? Thabo has so many questions. Errol looked uncomfortable. I don't want to impose. Nonsense! Mrs. Kagomo waved away his objection. It is decided. Now I must hurry to the kitchen. As she walked away with her grandson, Elon turned to his father. You've been mentoring her grandson? Just answering his questions, Errol said. The boy is smart. Reminds me of you at that age, always asking about how things work. The comparison caught Elon off guard. He'd spent so many years trying to escape his father's shadow, and now Errol was seeing shades of him in someone else. You know, Elon said, slowly, I never expected to find you doing this kind of work. What kind of work did you expect? Errol asked, a defensive edge creeping into his voice. Elon chose his next words carefully. Community work, teaching, helping people for free. Errol stood up suddenly. Well, people change, Elon. Even old men like me. He started walking back toward Mrs. Como's house. Watching his father's stiff back, Elon realized he'd touched a nerve. But before he could decide whether to apologize or press further, he saw a flash of movement on another roof down the street. Someone else was working on solar panels. Dad, Elon called, pointing down the street. Look there, another repair job? Errol turned and squinted in the direction Elon was pointing. His expression changed immediately. That's not a repair. That's Marcus Visser, Errol said, his voice hardening. Come on! Without waiting for Elon, Errol strode purposefully toward the house with the figure on the roof. Elon hurried to catch up, surprised by his father's sudden urgency. Who's Marcus? Visser? Elon asked when he reached his father's side. Local businessman. Owns Sunshine Solutions, Errol said through clenched teeth. Charges people 3 times what repairs should cost. When they can't pay, he takes their systems back, then resells them. As they got closer, Elon could see a man in his 40s on the roof. He was removing solar panels, not fixing them. Below, an older man and woman watched helplessly. The woman, wiping tears from her eyes. Visser! Errol called out sharply. What are you doing to the Naidu's system? The man on the roof looked down, annoyed at the interruption. When he spotted Errol, his face darkened. This is business, Musk. Not your concern, Marcus Visser said coldly. The Naidus missed 3 payments. Contract says I can reclaim the EE equipment. Mr. Musk, please, the older man below said to Errol. Our daughter lost her job. We just need another month to catch up on payments. Elon watched his father's face. Errol's jaw was set in a way Elon recognized from childhood arguments. It was the look his father got when he wouldn't back down. The system is worth 4 times what they still owe you, Errol called up to Visser. You're not reclaiming it, you're stealing it. Visser stood up on the roof, his hands on his hips. Says the man who undercuts my business by working for free. You're the one causing problems here, old man. These people think they deserve handouts because of you. Elon felt a surge of anger. Whatever his complicated feelings about his father, he didn't like seeing someone speak to Errol this way. How much do they owe? Elon asked, stepping forward. Visser looked at him, noticing Elon for the first time. Who's this? Your bodyguard? Visser laughed. My son, Errol said simply. Visser's expression changed as he looked more carefully at Elon. Recognition dawned in his eyes. Wait, you're that Musk? The Tesla guy? Visser's tone shifted from dismissive to calculating. Well, this is interesting. Come to visit Daddy and see his little charity project? How much do the Naidus owe? Elon repeated, his voice calm but firm. 9,000 rand, Mrs. Naidu said before Visser could answer. But he wants to take a system worth 35,000. Elon reached for his phone, but realized he had no South African payment apps. He looked at his father. Do you have a way to transfer money here? Errol nodded, understanding immediately. He pulled out his own phone. No, Mr. Naidu said, putting his hand on Errol's arm. We don't want charity. We want fairness. Visser laughed from the roof. Fairness? This is business. You signed a contract. A predatory contract, Errol fired back. Elon studied the solar setup on the Naidu's roof. It was similar to Mrs. Como's, but larger. He could see why Visser was eager to reclaim it. He'd probably resell it at full price to another family, trapping them in the same cycle. Errol was still arguing with Visser when Elon spotted a ladder leaning against the side of the house. Without a word, he walked over and began climbing it. "Elon!" his father called in alarm. "What are you doing?" Elon didn't answer. He climbed steadily until he reached the roof, then carefully made his way to where Visser was working. The businessman backed up a step, suddenly unsure. "Let me see what you're doing here," Elon said, examining the half-dismantled solar array. "Look, Mr. Musk, this is just standard business," Visser said, his tone now respectful. "Nothing personal. Against the Naidus." Elon ignored him, focusing instead on the solar panels. He could see that one panel was cracked and another had wiring issues. But the main problem was the inverter, which looked damaged. "Did you sell them this inverter?" Elon asked, pointing to the device. "Of course," Visser said defensively. "It's the wrong size for this system," Elon said. "It's too small. That's why they're not getting enough power. That's why the system keeps failing." Below, Errol had climbed halfway up the ladder and was listening. "He's right," Errol called to the Naidus. "Your system has been underperforming because Visser installed the wrong equipment." Visser's face reddened. "I don't have to listen to this. I have a legal right to reclaim this equipment." "Actually," Elon said calmly, "I think you sold them defective equipment. That might be fraud. I'm sure the South African consumer protection laws have something to say about that." "Are you threatening me?" Visser demanded. "No," Elon said. "I'm offering you a choice." By now, several neighbors had gathered in the street, watching the confrontation. Errol had climbed fully onto the roof and was examining the system himself. "Elon's right," Errol confirmed. "This inverter is only rated for a 2 kW system. The Naidus have a 4.5 kW array here." Visser looked trapped. He glanced down at the growing crowd, then back at the two Musk men. "What do you want?" he asked Elon, lowering his voice. "Fix their system properly," Elon said. "Install the correct inverter, and revise their payment plan to something they can actually afford." "That would cost me money," Visser protested. "Less than a fraud lawsuit would cost," Elon pointed out. For a moment, it looked like Visser might argue further, but another voice called from below. "Mr. Visser, is there a problem with the Naidu's system?" Elon looked down to see Mrs. Kogomo, standing in the street, hands on her hips. Beside her was her grandson Thabo, and behind them, at least a dozen neighbors had gathered. "Mrs. Como," Visser said, forcing a smile. "Just a small technical issue we're resolving." "Really?" she replied skeptically. "Because it looked to me like you were taking their solar panels. The same thing you tried to do to the Mohales last month." "And the Dlamini's before that," the crowd murmured. Elon realized that Mrs. Como held considerable influence in this community. Visser looked increasingly uncomfortable. "There seems to be a misunderstanding. I was actually here to upgrade their system. Is that so?" Errol asked pointedly. Trapped between angry neighbors, potential legal issues, and the unexpected presence of one of the world's richest men, Visser finally backed down. "Fine," he said. "I'll install a proper inverter, but they still need to make payments at a fair rate," Elon insisted. "No more than what the equipment is actually worth. And I'll be checking your work," Errol added, "so don't try to install more shoddy equipment." The crowd below broke into applause. Mrs. Naidu was wiping away tears again, but this time they were tears of relief. Mr. Naidu was shaking hands with neighbors, accepting their congratulations. As the excitement died down, Elon found himself looking at his father with new eyes. Errol hadn't just been fixing solar panels for neighbors. He'd been protecting them from predatory businesses like Visser's. You could have told me this was happening, Elon said quietly as they climbed down from the roof. Would you have believed? Me? Errol asked. The question hit Elon hard. Would he have believed his father was fighting for justice in his community? Or would he have assumed Errol had some angle, some way to benefit himself? I don't know, Elon admitted honestly. When they reached the ground, Mrs. Como hurried over to them. Now you must definitely come for dinner, she insisted. Both of you. The Naidus too. We have much to discuss. As they walked back toward Mrs. Como's house, Errol hung back, moving slowly. Elon noticed his father looked exhausted. Are you okay? He asked. Just tired, Errol said. I'm not as young as I used to be. For the first time, Elon truly saw his father's age. The slightly stooped shoulders, the careful steps. This was not the towering, intimidating figure of his childhood. This was an aging man still trying to make a difference. What you're doing here, Elon said carefully. It matters to these people. Errol looked surprised by the comment. For a moment, father and son walked in silence. There's something I need to tell you, Errol said finally. Something important. But not here, not in front of everyone. Elon nodded, wondering what secret his father had been keeping. Whatever it was, he was finally ready to listen. Back at Mrs. Como's house, the small living room was crowded with people. The Naidus had joined them, still thanking Elon and Errol for their help. Mrs. Como's grandson Thabo was asking Elon questions about electric cars. Neighbors kept stopping by to say hello. It was nearly an hour before the excitement died down, and most of the visitors left. Only the Musks, the Naidus, and Thabo remained for dinner. Mrs. Como's dining table was small, but she had expanded it with a card table at one end. The food was simple but delicious, a traditional South African meal of boboti, yellow rice, and vegetables from her garden. Mrs. Kagomo, Elon said as they ate, you seem to know everyone in this neighborhood. The elderly woman smiled. I taught at the local school for 40 years. Math was my subject. I taught the parents of some of these children, and then the children themselves. 40 years? Elon was impressed. That's dedication. I loved it, Mrs. Kagomo said. Numbers are beautiful things. They make sense in a world that often doesn't. She looked at Elon with sharp eyes. You understand this, I think. Elon nodded. Numbers had always made sense to him, too. Tell them about your students, Gogo, Thabo encouraged, using the affectionate term for grandmother. Mrs. Kagomo's face brightened. Oh, many of my students have done well. 4 doctors, 6 engineers, 2 professors. 1 works for the space agency in Cape Town. Another designs water systems for rural villages. Mrs. Kagomo could have taught at any school in South Africa, Mr. Naidu added. The best private schools tried to hire her. But she stayed in our community school when we needed good teachers most. Elon glanced at his father, who was listening quietly. Had Errol known about Mrs. Kagomo's background when he first helped her? Is that why you bought the solar panels? Elon asked her. To save money for retirement? Mrs. Kagomo nodded. My teacher's pension is not large, and electricity costs keep rising here. Last year, they increased prices by 20%. My grandson said solar would be a good investment. It was, Thabo said, until the system broke, and the company wanted more money than Gogo had to fix it. That's when your father came to help, Mrs. Kagomo continued. He said it was a simple problem, just a bad connection. He fixed it in one afternoon. She reached over and patted Errol's hand. A good man? Errol looked uncomfortable with the praise. It wasn't much, he muttered. Do your grandchildren visit? Often? Elon asked, trying to learn more about her life. A shadow crossed Mrs. Kagomo's face. Thabo visits when he can. My other grandchildren live far away, 2 in Cape Town, 1 in London. My daughter works for a bank there. And your husband? Elon asked gently. Passed away 2 years ago, she said. Heart attack. Very sudden. We were married for 52 years. I'm sorry, Elon said. Life continues, Mrs. Kagomo said, with quiet dignity. I have my home, my garden, my memories, and good neighbors. She smiled at Errol. As dinner continued, Elon found himself drawn to Mrs. Kagomo's stories about her years of teaching. She described how she helped girls become confident in math when society told them it wasn't for them, how she tutored struggling students after hours, how she fought for better textbooks and supplies. What about during apartheid? Elon asked. That must have been difficult. Mrs. Kagomo's expression grew serious. Yes, very difficult. Our school received much less funding than white schools. We had old books, crowded classrooms, but we taught anyway. Education was our form of resistance. Elon thought about his own childhood during those years. His privileged white life had been so different from what Mrs. Kagomo described. He had attended good schools, had resources, opportunities. The contrast made him uncomfortable. After apartheid ended, Mrs. Kagomo continued, things improved, slowly. There is still much work to do, but I have seen progress in my lifetime. I taught through the old South Africa into the new one. Thabo looked at his grandmother with obvious pride. Gogo still helps students. Kids from the neighborhood come here for math help all the time. Just a few, Mrs. Kagomo said modestly. Those who need extra attention. And you don't charge them, Mrs. Naidu added. Of course not, Mrs. Kagomo replied. Education should not be only for those who can pay. Elon caught his father watching Mrs. Kagomo with an expression he couldn't quite read. Respect, certainly, but something else, too. As the ahord meal ended, Elon helped clear the dishes. In the small kitchen, Mrs. Kagomo touched his arm. Your father speaks of you often, she said quietly. Elon nearly dropped the plate he was holding. He does? She nodded. He follows your work. The electric cars, the space rockets, the tunnels. He has newspaper clippings. I find that hard to believe, Elon said. Believe it, Mrs. Kagomo said firmly. He is proud, like many men. It is difficult for him to say these things directly. Elon didn't know how to respond. The father Mrs. Kagomo described sounded nothing like the man he'd grown up with. When they returned to the living room, the Naidus were saying their goodbyes. Thabo had to return to his dormitory at the university. Soon, only Elon, Errol, and Mrs. Kagomo remained. Now, Mrs. Kagomo said, settling into her armchair, we can speak more freely. There is something you should know, Elon. Errol shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Perhaps this isn't necessary, Namsa, he said, using Mrs. Kagomo's first name. It is, she replied firmly. You have both carried misunderstandings for too long. Elon looked between them, confused. What are you talking about? Mrs. Kagomo leaned forward. Did you know, Elon, that many years ago, I was your teacher too? Elon stared at her in shock. What? When? You were in 4th grade, Mrs. Kagomo said. I was a substitute teacher at your school for one term when Mrs. van der Merwe went on maternity leave. Elon searched his memory. 4th grade. He would have been about 9 or 10. It was right around the time his parents divorced. I don't remember, he admitted. Mrs. Kagomo smiled gently. It was a difficult time for you. Your parents had just separated. You were very quiet in class, but so smart with numbers. Elon looked at his father. Did you know this? Errol nodded slowly. Yes, that's how I met Mrs. Como, Namsa. When I came to parent-teacher conferences that term. You never told me, Elon said. There were many things happening then, Errol said quietly. Mrs. Como rose from her chair. I'm going to make us some tea. And then I think you two need to talk privately. There are things a son should hear from his father. Before either man could object, she disappeared into the kitchen. Silence filled the room. Elon could hear the clock ticking, the distant sounds of traffic, the clink of cups in the kitchen. His father sat across from him, looking down at his hands. So, Elon finally said, you've been helping Mrs. Como with her solar panels because she was my teacher 40 years ago. Not exactly, Errol said. He took a deep breath. After I fixed her system that first time, we got talking. She remembered you, asked about what you were doing now. I told her about Tesla, SpaceX, all of it. And she said something that changed things for me. Errol paused. She said you had always been someone who wanted to solve the big problems, even as a child. She remembered you asking questions in class about how to make cars that didn't need gasoline. Elon blinked in surprise. Had he really been talking about electric cars that young? At first, I just helped Namsa, because she's a good person who needed help, Errol continued. But then I started thinking about what she said about you, about solving problems. I realized I had spent my career just making money, while you were trying to change the world. Errol's voice had a hint of something Elon had never heard before. Regret. That's when I started helping other neighbors with their systems, Errol said. It felt useful, more useful than anything I'd done in years. From the kitchen came the whistle of a kettle. Mrs. Kagoma was taking her time, giving them space to talk. Why didn't you tell me any of this? Elon asked. Errol laughed without humor. When? During our brief phone calls that always end in arguments? Would you have believed me if I said I was inspired by your work? He had a point. Elon had spent decades building walls between himself and his father. He probably wouldn't have believed this change of heart. There's more, Errol said, lowering his voice. Something I haven't told anyone. Not even Namsa. Elon waited. 3 years ago, I had a health scare, Errol said. Heart problems. The doctors thought I might need surgery. You never told me, Elon said. Why would I? Errol asked. We barely spoke, and I didn't want your pity. Did you have the surgery? No. Errol shook his head. It wasn't as serious as they first thought, but it was enough to make me think about what I would leave behind, what my life had amounted to. He looked up at Elon, his eyes clear and direct. I'm not proud of many things I've done. I wasn't a good father to you. I was too harsh, too critical, always focusing on what you did wrong instead of what you did right. Elon felt a tightness in his chest. His father had never spoken to him this way before. When I started reading about your work with sustainable energy, it got me thinking, Errol continued, about the future, about what kind of world we're leaving for the next generation. I realized I could use my engineering skills to help people here, in a small way. How many people have you helped? Elon asked. 23 families in this neighborhood so far, Errol said, plus a small clinic down the road and a community center. I keep track in a notebook. Elon tried to process this information. His father, the man he had described in interviews as terrible, had been quietly helping people while asking for nothing in return. I don't do it for recognition, Errol said, as if reading Elon's thoughts. I do it because it needs doing, and because I'm good at it." Mrs. Gomo returned with a tray of tea. She set it down and poured 3 cups. "Have you told him, Errol?" she asked. "Some of it," Errol replied. "Show him the box," she said firmly. Errol hesitated, then stood up slowly. "It's in my car. I'll be back." After he left, Mrs. Kagome sat across from Elon. "Your father is a complicated man, stubborn, like you. But his heart is changing." "I'm finding that hard to believe," Elon admitted. "Change is possible at any age," she said. "I've seen it many times in my years of teaching. The most difficult students sometimes surprise you the most." A few minutes later, Errol returned carrying a weathered cardboard box. He set it on the Iber coffee table between them. "Go ahead," he said to Elon. "Look." Elon opened the box. Inside were dozens of newspaper clippings, printouts of articles, and magazines. He picked up the top one, a story about SpaceX's first successful rocket landing. Below that was an article about Tesla reaching production milestones. There were stories about Neuralink, the Boring Company, and solar initiatives. "You kept all these?" Elon asked, stunned. "Since the beginning," Errol said quietly. Elon continued looking through the box. At the bottom was a yellowed newspaper clipping about his first software sale, the blaster game he'd created at age 12. "I don't understand," Elon said. "You never seemed to care about any of this. You always told me my ideas wouldn't work." Errol looked away. "I was wrong. And I was jealous, perhaps. You were doing things I never had the courage to attempt." Mrs. Kagome sipped her tea, watching them carefully. "Sometimes," she said, "a father's fear for his son comes out as criticism. He doesn't want you to be hurt by failure, so he tries to protect you by telling you not to try." "That's no excuse," Errol said sharply. "I should have been supportive." The admission hung in the air between them. Elon felt decades of anger and resentment swirling inside him, alongside this new confusion. Could people really change this much? Could his father? "Why are you showing me this now?" Elon asked finally. Errol picked up his teacup with slightly shaking hands. "Because I wanted you to know that despite everything, I've always been proud of you, even when I couldn't say it." The words hung in the air between them. Elon sat frozen, unsure how to respond. Part of him wanted to reject this sudden confession. How could he believe his father now, after decades of criticism and distance? Mrs. Gomo sensed the tension. "Perhaps you two should take a walk," she suggested. "The evening is pleasant, and sometimes it's easier to talk while moving." "Good idea," Errol said, seeming relieved by the suggestion. "I'll show you how the neighborhood has changed since you lived here, Elon," Mrs. Kagome said, rising from her chair. "You might find it interesting." Despite his confusion, Elon found himself agreeing. The three of them stepped outside into the cooling evening air. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. "The shopping center at the corner is new," Mrs. Kagome pointed as they walked. "It opened 5 years ago. Before that, we had to go much further for groceries." Elon nodded, only half listening. His mind was still processing his father's words. "I've always been proud of you." Was that possible? Could his father have felt pride while telling him his ideas were foolish? As they turned onto the main road, Elon noticed how different everything looked. New buildings stood where he remembered empty lots. Trees had grown taller. Some landmarks remained, but they seemed smaller than in his memory. "Your old school is still there," Mrs. Kagome said, pointing down a side street, "though they've added a new wing." A young boy rode by on a bicycle, waving at Mrs. Gomo. "Hello, Mr. Musk," He called to Errol. "Hello, Sifo," Errol replied. "How's your mother's solar system working?" "Great. No more candles for homework." The boy grinned and pedaled away. "That's Sifo Mbeki," Mrs. Gomo explained to Elon. "Your father fixed their system last month. The boy is very bright, wants to be an engineer." As they continued walking, more neighbors greeted them. An older man watering his garden, a woman closing her shop for the evening, a family having dinner on their porch. All knew Errol, and many mentioned how he had helped them. "Mr. Musk, the batteries are working perfectly. When are you coming to check our inverter, Mr. Musk? Thanks to you, we had power during the last outage." Elon watched his father's interactions with these people. Errol was different with them, less guarded, almost friendly. These weren't the polite nods he'd given neighbors in Elon's childhood. These were genuine connections. "Mr. Musk! Mr. Musk!" A man in his 30s hurried across the street to join them. "I wanted to show you something." The man, who introduced himself as Daniel Nkosi, led them to a small storefront with a sign reading, "Nkosi Cool Treats." "My business," Daniel said, proudly. "Ice cream and frozen yogurt. The solar panels you fixed power my freezers. Even during outages, my products stay frozen. Business has doubled." Inside the small shop, Daniel insisted on giving them all free ice cream. While Mrs. Gomo chatted with him, Elon turned to his father. "You did this?" he asked quietly. Errol shrugged. "Just fixed his system. He did the rest." "You're making a real difference here," Elon said. "Small scale," Errol replied. "Nothing like what you're doing." "Scale isn't everything," Elon said, surprising himself with the admission. As they left the shop, a young boy approached them hesitantly. He looked about 10 years old, with serious eyes behind thick glasses. "Excuse me," he said to Elon. "Are you really the man who makes the electric cars?" "I am," Elon answered. The boy's eyes widened. "I want to make electric cars too, but better ones. Ones that can drive themselves and never crash and can go for 1,000 kilometers without charging." Elon smiled. "Those are good goals." "Can I tell you my ideas?" the boy asked eagerly. For the next few minutes, Elon listened as the child explained his theories on battery efficiency and autonomous driving, some surprisingly insightful, others delightfully impossible. The boy's enthusiasm reminded Elon of himself at that age, full of big ideas and certainty that he could make them work. "You should listen to this young man," Elon told his father. "He might put us both out of business someday." Errol nodded, seriously, to the boy. "Keep thinking and learning." As they continued their walk, Elon noticed how different Pretoria looked through adult eyes. As a child, he'd focused on the problems, the social divisions, the limited opportunities, the reasons to leave. Now he saw resilience too, people creating community despite challenges. "The solar systems make a big difference here," Mrs. Kagomo explained. "Power outages are scheduled now, sometimes 8 hours per day without electricity. For businesses, for students, for families with babies or medical needs, reliable power changes everything." They turned down another street, and Elon saw a small building with children going in and out. "That's the community library," Mrs. Kagomo said. "Your father installed solar panels there last year. Now they have lights and computers that work even during outages. Children can study there anytime." Elon glanced at his father, who was looking anywhere but at him. "You didn't mention the library," Elon said. "It was a group effort," Errol replied dismissively. "Several of us worked on it." Mrs. Como shook her head with a smile. He donated most of the equipment himself. As the sky darkened, they turned back toward Mrs. Como's house. The neighborhood was settling into evening routines, families gathering for dinner, teenagers chatting on corners, older people sitting on porches. "It's different than I remember," Elon admitted. "Places change," Mrs. Kagomo said. "People too." She looked meaningfully at Errol, who walked slightly ahead of them, nodding at neighbors as they passed. "Even stubborn old engineers?" Elon asked quietly. Mrs. Kagomo smiled. "Sometimes, especially them." By the time they returned to Mrs. Kagomo's house, night had fallen. The street lights flickered on, their glow soft against the darkening sky. As they approached the front door, they spotted someone sitting on Mrs. Kagomo's porch steps. "Thabo!" Mrs. Kagomo called out. "I thought you went back to university." Her grandson stood up. "Class was cancelled. Professor is sick." He looked at Elon eagerly. "I was hoping you were still here, Mr. Musk. I have some questions about solar efficiency, if you have time." Before Elon could answer, the street went dark. The sudden blackout left only the moon and stars providing faint light. "Ah," Mrs. Gomo sighed. "Load shedding. Right on schedule." But her house remained lit, a warm glow coming from the windows. "Your solar system is working perfectly," Errol noted with satisfaction. Inside, Mrs. Gomo's living room was illuminated by efficient LED lights powered by her solar batteries. The rest of the neighborhood had disappeared into darkness, but here, life continued normally. "I was just finishing up some adjustments to your monitoring system," Thabo explained, leading them into the small room that served as Mrs. Gomo's home office. On a desk sat a simple laptop connected to a small device with blinking lights. "Thabo built this," Errol said, gesturing to the device. "It measures how much power is being generated and used, helps prevent overloading the batteries." Elon leaned closer, examining the setup. It was basic but clever, a homemade energy management system. "You made this?" Elon asked Thabo. The young man nodded shyly. "Your father helped with the wiring, but I wrote the software." "Show him how it works," Errol encouraged. Thabo sat at the laptop and opened a simple program. Graphs appeared showing power generation throughout the day and usage patterns. "See? Gogo uses most power in the morning and evening," Thabo explained, pointing to peaks in the chart. "The system generates most power midday when the sun is strongest. The challenge is storing enough for when it's needed." Elon nodded, recognizing the same challenges Tesla faced with its Powerwall home battery systems. "What about rainy days?" Elon asked. "We've configured the battery to always maintain at least 30% reserve," Errol answered. "And most homes here have grid connections as backup. The problem is, the grid itself is unreliable." "South Africa's energy crisis is getting worse, not better," Thabo added. "Eskom, our national power company, has aging coal plants that keep breaking down. They can't meet demand." "That's why solar is so important here," Mrs. Kagomo said. "Not just to save money, but to have power when the grid fails." Elon found himself pulled into the conversation, the engineer in him responding to the technical challenge. "What's the biggest issue you're facing with these home systems?" "Battery cost," Errol said immediately. "And installation complexity," Thabo added. "Many people can afford the panels, but not the expertise to install them properly." "That's why your father's work is so important," Mrs. Kagomo said. "He provides the knowledge for free." As they talked, Elon found himself standing next to his father, both of them examining Thabo's monitoring system. For a moment, they were just two engineers discussing a problem, the years of tension temporarily set aside. "Have you considered a community-based microgrid?" Elon asked, thinking out loud. "Instead of each home having its own complete system, you could have shared battery storage." Errol nodded thoughtfully. "I've thought about it. The challenge is coordination and trust. Who controls the power? Who pays for maintenance? We could create a neighborhood cooperative, Thabo suggested excitedly. Everyone contributes what they can: money, technical skills, maintenance work. Mrs. Kagome watched the three of them with an amused expression. Look at you, solving problems together. The comment made Elon and Errol glance at each other, suddenly self-conscious. Tesla has been developing smaller, more affordable home battery systems, Elon said after a moment. They're not available in South Africa yet, but they could help with situations like this. Your company doesn't focus much on developing markets, Errol noted, a hint of criticism in his voice. We've been expanding, Elon countered, feeling defensive. But yes, we prioritize North America and Europe first. Where the money is, Errol said. Where the infrastructure exists, Elon corrected. It's not just about profit. We need reliable grid connections, service networks, trained technicians. We could train people here, Thabo interjected. At my university, there are engineering students who would jump at the chance to work with Tesla technology. The conversation continued as they moved back to Mrs. Kagome's living room. Outside, the neighborhood remained dark, but inside, ideas were lighting up the room. Errol explained the specific challenges of South Africa's electrical system. Thabo outlined his vision for solar-powered community centers. Mrs. Kagome described how power outages affected local schools and clinics. Elon found himself taking mental notes, seeing the situation through new eyes. He'd always approached sustainable energy as a global challenge, but here it was intensely local and immediate. Not a future problem to solve, but a daily struggle for people like Mrs. Kagome and her neighbors. What about solar roofs? Thabo asked. I've read about Tesla's solar tiles. Could they work here? Possibly, Elon said, but they're still expensive. Traditional panels make more economic sense in this market. Economy isn't everything, Errol said quietly. Sometimes dignity matters too. People here are proud of their homes. They don't want them to look like technical experiments. The comment surprised Elon. His father talking about dignity and pride, rather than just technical specifications and cost? That was new. As the evening progressed, Mrs. Kagome served coffee and more of her homemade cookies. The power outage continued, but in her solar-powered home, it was barely noticeable. Through the window, Elon could see a few homes with dim lights, probably other solar users, but most of the neighborhood remained in darkness. This is the future they need, Elon thought, watching Thabo enthusiastically sketch a community microgrid. Design on a notepad. Not just technology dropped from above, but solutions grown from within, adapted to local needs. And somehow, remarkably, his father was part of building that future here in Pretoria. In his own small way, Elon Musk was helping create a sustainable world, just like his son. The realization hit Elon with unexpected force. For years, he had defined himself in opposition to his father. Errol was the past. Elon was the future. Errol represented the old South Africa. Elon had escaped to create something new. But now, those neat divisions were blurring. I have an idea, Elon said suddenly. The others looked at him, conversations pausing. What if we created a small program to help more people here get affordable solar repairs? Elon continued, thinking out loud. Not charity, but a sustainable model. Tesla could provide parts at cost. Local engineers and students could be trained for installation and maintenance. Thabo's eyes lit up. Like an apprenticeship program? Students could earn while they learn. Exactly, Elon nodded. We'd start small, just this neighborhood at first. see what works, what doesn't. We could use the community center as a training hub, Mrs. Kagome suggested. Many of my former students are now teachers who could help organize. Errol had been silent, his expression unreadable. Now he cleared his throat. And where would I fit into this grand plan of yours? There it was, the familiar edge in his father's voice. Defensive. Suspicious. You know the community, Elon said, carefully. You understand the specific challenges here. You could help coordinate the local efforts. So I'd be working for you, Errol asked, his voice cooler now. With me, Elon corrected. It would be a partnership. A partnership, Errol repeated skeptically, between a billionaire and a retired engineer. The room grew tense. Mrs. Kagome and Thabo exchanged glances. I think it's a wonderful idea, Mrs. Kagome said diplomatically. 2 generations of Musks working together to help our community. You're trying to take over, Errol said to Elon, ignoring her. Swoop in with your money and your company and make what I've been doing here into another Elon Musk project. That's not what I'm suggesting, Elon protested, feeling his frustration rise. Some things never changed, his father always assuming the worst of his intentions. I've been helping these people for 3 years, Errol continued, without fanfare, without turning it into a publicity stunt. Is that what you think this is? Elon demanded. A publicity stunt. Gentlemen, Mrs. Kagome interrupted firmly. This is not helpful. But the argument had already gained momentum. You've always needed to be the center of attention, Errol said. Always needed to make everything bigger, flashier. And you've always been too proud to accept help, Elon shot back. Too stubborn to see when something could be improved. I've managed just fine without Tesla's involvement, Errol said coldly. This isn't about Tesla or me, Elon insisted. It's about helping more people, scaling what works. Enough. Mrs. Kagome's voice cut through their argument. Both men fell, silent, looking at her in surprise. The elderly teacher had drawn herself up to her full height, her expression stern. You are both being ridiculous, she said, like schoolboys fighting over who has the better toy. Thabo stifled a laugh. Even Errol had the grace to look embarrassed. Elon, Mrs. Kagome continued, your father has done good work here. Work that matters to real people. He deserves respect for that. Elon nodded reluctantly. And Errol, she turned to his father, your son is offering resources that could help many more people. Your pride should not stand in the way of progress. For a moment, no one spoke. Outside, a dog barked in the darkness. The power outage continued, but Mrs. Kagome's solar-powered lights shone steadily. Perhaps we should start very small, Mrs. Kagome suggested in the silence. Just this street, 10 houses? See if we can make a model that works before thinking about anything larger. A pilot project, Thabo nodded enthusiastically. We could document everything, costs, training needs, common problems, and learn as we go. Errol and Elon were still eyeing each other warily. I won't interfere with what you've built here, Elon said finally. That's not my intention. And what exactly is your intention? Errol asked, still suspicious. You fly in for one day and suddenly want to change everything? I just want to help, Elon said. Isn't that what you've been doing? Helping? Fifi, simple questions seemed to deflate some of Errol's defensiveness. Yes, he admitted. Just helping. Then let me help too, Elon said. In whatever way makes sense. Mrs. Kagome clapped her hands once, decisively. Good. Now we are getting somewhere. She turned to Thabo. Get paper. We will make a proper plan. For the next hour, They sketched out what a small pilot project might look like. Thabo took notes as they talked through logistics, which houses to include, what equipment they would need, how training might work. The conversation remained a bit tense, but productive. Errol knew the specific needs of each family on the street. The Dlamini's needed better batteries, the Mokoenas had wiring issues, the Olivers needed a complete system overhaul. Elon contributed ideas about newer, more efficient components that could be sourced. Mrs. Gomo offered her home as a meeting place and suggested which neighbors might help with organization. As they worked, Elon noticed how much his father knew about each household, not just their technical needs, but their family situations. Errol knew which homes had students needing light for studying, which had medical equipment requiring reliable power, which ran small businesses from their kitchens or garages. This could actually work, Thabo said, looking at their notes with excitement. A community-supported solar program with technical backing from Tesla and local expertise from Mr. Musk. From both Mr. Musks. Just this street, Errol said firmly. We see if it works before talking about anything larger. Agreed. Elon nodded. Mrs. Kagome smiled at them both. Sometimes the smallest beginnings lead to the biggest changes. As they wrapped up their planning session, the lights suddenly flickered across the street. The power outage was ending. Gradually, the neighborhood lit up again, house by house. But Elon knew the next outage was just a matter of time. Load shedding was a daily reality here. What they were planning, what his father had already been doing, was offering people independence from that uncertainty. Freedom to run their businesses, do their homework, keep their food cold, no matter what happened with the national grid. It wasn't as glamorous as launching rockets or building electric supercars, but looking at his father's determined face across the table, Elon realized it mattered just as much. The planning session ended as night grew deeper. Thabo left for his dormitory, proudly carrying the notes they'd made about the pilot project. Errol stood to leave as well. It's late, he said. I should get home. Will you come back tomorrow? Mrs. Kagome asked. We have more to discuss. Errol glanced at Elon. If you're still going to be here, my plane doesn't leave until tomorrow. Evening, Elon said. I can come by in the morning. Errol nodded and said his goodbyes. Through the window, Elon watched his father walk to his car, moving more slowly than Elon remembered, the weight of age visible in each careful step. You should drive him home, Mrs. Kagome suggested gently. He wouldn't accept that, Elon said. Perhaps not, she agreed. Stubborn, like I said. After Errol's car disappeared down the street, Elon prepared to leave as well. His driver had been waiting patiently all evening. Thank you for your hospitality, Elon said to Mrs. Kagome. And for... He hesitated, not sure how to express what he was feeling. For telling you about your father's work, she suggested. For that, and for being patient with both of us. Mrs. Kagome smiled. Teaching fourth graders for 40 years makes one very patient. As Elon reached for the door, she touched his arm. Wait, there's something else you should know. She disappeared into her bedroom and returned a moment later holding what looked like an old piece of paper. Years ago, when I taught your class, she began, your father came to speak with me. Not during the regular parent-teacher conferences. He came alone, one afternoon after school. Elon waited, curious. He was worried about you, Mrs. Kagome continued. You were so quiet, so inside your own head. The divorce was still new. Your father told me, I don't know how to be the father he needs. The simple admission hit Elon unexpectedly hard. He had never imagined his father feeling uncertainty about parenting. He asked my advice, Mrs. Kagome said. I told him what I tell all parents, that each child is different, that listening is as important as directing, that patience matters more than perfection. She unfolded the paper in her hands. A few years later, after you had moved to Canada, he gave me this, said he wanted me to see that you were doing well. She handed Elon the paper. It was a newspaper clipping, yellowed with age. The headline read, South African Emigrant Sells First Software Company. The article, dated 1995, was about Zip2, the company Elon had founded with his brother Kimball. He was tracking your progress even then, Mrs. Como said softly. Elon stared at the clipping. It was worn along the fold lines as if it had been opened and refolded many times. Why did he give this to you? Elon asked. I think he needed someone to share his pride with, she said. Someone who knew you as a child and could appreciate how far you'd come. But he never told me any of this, Elon said, frustration creeping into his voice. All those years, all those phone calls, he never once said he was proud. Some men find those words impossible to say, Mrs. Como replied, especially men of his generation. It doesn't mean they don't feel it. Elon carefully refolded the clipping and tried to hand it back, but Mrs. Kagome shook her head. Keep it. It belongs to you now. Outside, Elon's driver was waiting beside the car. The neighborhood was quiet, most houses dark, as people prepared for bed. Will you come back tomorrow? Mrs. Kagome asked as they stood at her door. Yes, Elon said. We have a project to plan. She smiled. Good. Bring your father with you if you can. The drive back to his hotel was quiet. Elon sat in the back seat, turning the newspaper clipping over in his hands, thinking about the day's revelations. His father, the man he'd spent decades trying not to become, had been quietly following his career all along, collecting articles, feeling pride he couldn't express. And now, in his 70s, Errol was channeling his engineering skills into helping others. Was it an attempt at redemption, a genuine change of heart? Or had there always been this better version of his father, hidden beneath the criticism and perfectionism? At the hotel, Elon nodded to the night staff as he crossed the lobby. In his suite, he placed the newspaper clipping on the desk and sat down heavily in the chair. His phone showed dozens of missed calls and hundreds of unread messages. The world's problems waiting for Elon Musk to solve them. But tonight, his mind was elsewhere. He picked up his phone and dialed a number he rarely called voluntarily. 1 ring, 2 rings, 3. Hello? His father's voice sounded surprised. Dad, Elon said, about tomorrow. I'll pick you up at 9. We can go to Mrs. Como's together. A pause. All right. And I was thinking, Elon continued, about the solar program. We discussed, what if we added a training component for young engineers like Thabo? That could work, Errol said cautiously. There's certainly talent here. They discussed the idea for a few minutes, their conversation still careful but less tense than before. Well, it's late, Errol said finally. I'll see you tomorrow. Dad, Elon said quickly, before his father could hang up. One more thing. Yes? Elon looked down at the worn newspaper clipping on his desk. I'm glad I came to Pretoria. Another pause. Longer this time. I'm glad too, son, Errol said finally, his voice softer than Elon had heard it in years. Elon ended the call and sat back in his chair. Outside his window, Pretoria spread out below him, a city of darkness and light. Somewhere out there, his father was perhaps sitting in his own chair, thinking about the same conversation. Tomorrow, they would go to Mrs. Kagomo's house and continue planning their small project. It wasn't world-changing like SpaceX or Tesla. It wouldn't make headlines, but it was a beginning. That was the end of our journey with Elon Musk discovering his father's unexpected charitable work, and the beginning of their potential reconciliation. Where are you listening from today? We'd love to know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this emotional exploration between Elon and Elon Musk, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more inspiring content like this. We post new videos regularly that aim to surprise, entertain, and touch your heart. Don't forget to share this video with friends and family who might appreciate this tale of family reconnection and redemption. By spreading these messages, we help foster kindness and awareness in our communities. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you in the next video.